Is Minecraft the most important game right now? Games are great for a wide variety of reasons. They're fun, social, intellectual, emotionally challenging, competitive, and they give us a very convenient way to ignore scary people on the subway. But as we often like to talk about here on Game Show, games can do some pretty important stuff. For example, what if I told you that maybe games are saving the world from a generation of incompetent adults who are deprived of play at a very young age? I know this might sound ridiculous, but I think Minecraft is doing exactly that. As we know, kids love them some Minecraft. In fact, almost a quarter of all Minecraft players are under the age of 15. Meanwhile, a new guard of overprotective parents are destroying the positive benefits associated with real-world play. This is really bad for adolescent development. I think, and this is just a theory, kids are attracted to Minecraft because it provides them the healthy types of play that they're not getting because their parents are sheltering them. And while some parents like this one complain that their daughter is obsessed with Minecraft, I think it's parents themselves that are to blame.
Turn off Minecraft.
So, could Minecraft's enormous success be due to a coddling kid culture? Before we dive into what makes Minecraft so special, let's take a closer look at the declining state of play for kids these days. First of all, kids today are subjected to overbearing parents. Eager dads push kids to be competitive as early as the age of 2. I even heard that they're racing babies these days. And then there are the so-called tiger moms who hone in on their kids' education with a laser focus at the expense of free time and recreation. Second, playgrounds just aren't the same anymore. Playgrounds are a lot safer these days due to litigation and parental fears. But it didn't always used to be that way. Lady Allen of Hurtwood's adventure playgrounds allowed kids to build fires and do other things that are totally insane by today's standards. Those playgrounds sound amazing.
There was a playground that had been made entirely by the children themselves.
Third, there are fewer places for kids to go unsupervised. The explosion of helicopter parenting means that no kids can ever do anything by themselves. And even parents who can or don't want to raise their kids that way can face dire consequences. And social spaces like malls are actually trying to shun kids who are there without their parents. One community in the UK actually installed anti-teenager alarms in an attempt to deter skateboarders. These emit high-frequency sounds that are really annoying for those who are under the age of 25.
Are you feeling your head, so it's kind of like a headache?
That's just mean. And this is all really bad news because play does some really important stuff. For example, according to the emotion regulation theory, play helps kids control anger and fear. Evolutionary psychologist Ellen Sandsetter argues that we could see increased neuroticism and psychopathology if we prevent kids from being able to play. So over-nurturing instincts by parents today are creating this radically dystopian future populated by grown-ups who didn't get enough time in the sandbox. Can anything save us from this joyless nightmare? Well, maybe Notch could. After all, Minecraft has sold more than 50 million copies, and in many ways, Minecraft compensates for the valuable kinds of play that today's kids are missing out on. So there you go, the world's safe after all. Glad we solved that. But seriously, one big way that Minecraft does this is by offering unstructured play. Yes, there are rules, like 9 iron ingots are needed to craft 1 iron block, but outside of survival mode, there are no rules. I mean, you can do whatever it is that you want, like build the country of Denmark, or film a music video for Arcade Fire, or just mine. Child psychologists agree that unstructured play fosters important skills like creativity, decision-making, and independence. And German researchers at the University of Hildesheim found that kids with copious amounts of unstructured play go on to lead more successful lives. Pretty good so far, right? Another great thing that Minecraft does is it allows kids to engage in risky play. You're probably saying, hold up. Danger is bad, but risk-taking for children is actually advantageous. It's been shown that kids who expose themselves to dangerous play are actually using the same techniques as adults who try to overcome phobias. You may still be skeptical, and I totally understand. Minecraft is virtual. The biggest danger that you face is, I don't know, eye strain. But it doesn't matter if the activities are actually in real life dangerous. Sandstetter again says that kids just need to feel like they're taking risks. And Minecraft is super risky. You're exploring these massive caverns where you can easily get lost or fall to your death. You're handling dangerous tools like a pickaxe or dynamite, knowing that if you mess up, you'll lose all that you've worked for.
You have got to be kidding me.
And finally, Minecraft lets kids play unsupervised. Because so much of Minecraft happens on the group servers, kids learn social interactions from other kids without their parents dictating exactly how it's supposed to go. Just like I used to try and build a fort in the giant tree in my backyard with my friends, Minecraft's multiplayer encourages kids to make things together, like this rideable roller coaster. Many parents believe that spending too much time on the internet is wholly a bad thing, but social media researcher Dana Boyd says that young people learn and understand social dynamics by spending time together online. Yes, there is such a thing as Minecraft addiction, but within reason, spending time together on Minecraft servers is a good thing for kids. So Minecraft is more than just an amazing game that lets you build whatever it is that you want. It's actually a really important game because it fulfills some crucial developmental needs that kids have. Remember, as Dana Boyd has argued, kids want to be social, but if you take away all the real world places where that type of interaction can happen, malls, playgrounds, etc., they'll just flock to places like Minecraft where they can do it on their own terms, unsupervised. So parents, the next time your kids are overindulging in Minecraft, remember, it's all your fault. But don't worry, it's doing them a lot of good. So what do you think? Is Minecraft saving future generations from a life deprived of play? Hash it out in the comments, and if you like what you saw, please subscribe. I'll see you next week. Last week we talked about my favorite female characters. Let's see what you had to say. Becky Pennock has been making independent games for the last couple years, and she says one of the big advantages of being independent is the fact that she can choose who her main characters are. So she's been looking at female characters, people of color, people who have been traditionally underrepresented. And she makes this excellent point, which is that when you put like a woman at the center, that opens up all kinds of narrative possibilities. Not necessarily better ones, but different ones from having a straight white male, for example. If you look at television, Orange is the New Black, for example, is a story that really could only be told if you had women at the forefront as the main characters. One of my favorite shows, The Killing, features a single mother who's a cop named Lyndon, and she struggles with depression, and really you could only have her at the center. It tells a totally different story. So yeah, Becky, good point. Diogo V. Kersting and others took issue with the statistic that I cited from the ESA that close to 50% of all players of games are women. So there's two things I'll say about that. One is I think that the big question that a lot of you are wrestling with is this question of what is a gamer, which I in fact did an episode on, but I'll reiterate. A gamer, very simply, is someone who plays games. It doesn't matter necessarily what type of games, just like a reader is someone who reads books. So that brings me to my second point. It's entirely possible that in the games that you play, they might be in a community of people who are mostly men. And that's totally fine, but that would give you the perception that all people who play games are just dudes. Just like if you're someone who maybe reads a book series like Twilight, and you look around and say, oh, it's mostly women perhaps who read books like Twilight, ergo, all readers are female. That's not true, just like all gamers are not totally men. So I just think that you need to look outside of your particular perspective and look at all the different types of people who play games. It could be Candy Crush Saga, it could be DayZ. As long as they are games, then the person who plays them are gamers. That's what I'm arguing anyway. You may still take issue with that. Tales from iDEATH, and a bunch of you said that I was being narrow-minded because I didn't include non-playable characters. Okay, here's the thing. The thing that defines video games as a medium, what makes them different from film or television or any other kind of like visual media, is the fact that you get to embody a character. That is the fundamental difference. That's what's important about games and what makes games games, as opposed to just being like really long cut sequences that you watch, for example, right? Insofar as that, I think that that is the core value proposition of playing a game in the first place. Then I think that having playable characters who are women is the most important thing. That is what makes games games. So I'm not saying that there aren't amazing performances from non-playable characters, but there's a fundamental divide between a character that you watch on screen that you have no control over and a character whose thoughts and personalities you inhabit and that you ultimately control. So one of my favorite female characters that I named was Sheik, and according to Gavin Ward-O'Hagan, it's a little bit more complicated than just having a woman dress up to look like a man. In fact, Nintendo accidentally created a bi-gender character, as Gavin pointed out, and the language around Sheik's gender is sometimes male, sometimes female, depending on where you look, like the Ocarina of Time manga, which unfortunately I have not read. So Gavin, thank you for pointing that out, and consider this the asterisk next to my Sheik selection.